brethren.
Good morning.
Before we get into John, I want to read from Isaiah chapter 55, verse 1. In Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah wrote so much about the person of Jesus Christ and his work and his ministry that some Bible scholars refer to the prophet Isaiah as the fifth gospel, because so much of what Jesus Christ has done and is doing and will yet do is found within the pages of Isaiah. We're going to go to Isaiah chapter 55, verse 1. He writes, everyone that thirsts, you come to the waters. And he that has no money, you come and you buy and eat. Yes, come and buy wine and milk without money and without price. You see, Isaiah is looking ahead to all those things that Jesus Christ would offer each and every one, any and all, freely, by grace alone, ours without the purchase of money, freely given. You see, Isaiah, he's looking ahead to that work of Jesus, and that offer that Jesus Christ will extend to all humanity, any who will receive it freely, to have that quench, that thirst, that deep-seated need for God to be met in Him. And it is ours freely, extended to each and every one, to all who will receive it. Now Jesus, after He has been preaching throughout Judea, after He had conducted a successful tour as He is preaching, that is, He's extending that same invitation, that invitation that Isaiah is issuing in Isaiah 55, that is what Jesus Christ is offering. And Jesus has been touring around Judea, and He has been preaching that gospel, that message of salvation, the kingdom of God, however you want to say it. And many are responding, and many are coming to Him, and many are being baptized. They're responding to that message. You see, Jesus Christ is issuing that same invitation that Isaiah is writing about. And here we see in John 4, verse 1, the Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although it was not Jesus who baptized, but it was His disciples. When the Lord learned of this, He left Judea and He went back once more to Galilee. Now He had to go through Samaria. So He came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as He was from the journey, sat down at the well, and it was about the 6th hour. So Jesus, after He had conducted a successful evangelism tour, you might say, as He preached the gospel, as He issued that invitation, many were responding and were coming and being baptized. It's very important to understand the rest of what transpires in John chapter 4. Without understanding that Jesus was baptizing. It's very important why John mentions the baptisms. The people were responding to that invitation that Jesus was offering. And here Jesus Christ, after hearing that the Pharisees, the religious leaders, were aware of His activities, decides to return to Galilee. Now, to get to Galilee, the straight route was through Samaria. You see, but the Jews, the pious Jews of their day, they would try to avoid Samaria. They would go to the west and then up the coast. But Jesus doesn't do that. He goes the straight route through Samaria. And the reason why the pious Jews would want to avoid Samaria is the people that lived there. The people that lived there, or people had been brought there by the king of Assyria right around 722 BC. And they were people who were intermarried with the people of Israel. So they weren't altogether Jewish, but they weren't altogether Gentile. But in the eyes of the pious Jews of the day, they were unclean, and they wanted to avoid them. So they would go the route around Samaria. But Jesus Christ, He doesn't do that. He doesn't avoid them. Instead, Jesus takes that short route home, right through Samaria. And He comes to the town of Sychar, where Jacob's well is located. You see, this is the route. Jesus doesn't avoid the Samaritans. He goes to them. He doesn't avoid them. Now, the Samaritan people, these half Jew and half Gentiles, had developed their own traditions, their own worship, their own interpretation of the books of Moses, and their primary place of worship was at Mount Gerizim. You see, they had their own adaptation of what you find in the Old Covenant. And you see, because of who they were and who they weren't, they and the Jewish people had strained relationships. Again, the Jews would try to avoid them, but Jesus does not. Now, when Jesus enters this village of Sychar, which is near Mount Ebal, here where Jacob's well is, Jesus stops. And as he rests, a Samaritan woman comes to the well to draw water. Now understand that the spring that fed Jacob's well was fed by a deep stream in the earth, a flowing stream that the local people referred to as the fountain of life. This well had become a cultural icon to the people of Samaria, especially the people of Sychar. It brought them a sense of identification with the patriarchs of Israel and with the God they served. Now this woman that arrives at the well, that we will read about here in a moment, this woman is immediately engaged in an unprecedented breach of cultural protocol by Jesus himself as he begins to speak to her. In John 4, verses 7 to 9, we read, "When a woman, a Samaritan woman, came to draw water, Jesus said to her, 'Will you give me a drink?'" So he immediately begins to engage her. "Will you give me a drink?" For his disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For the Jews do not associate with the Samaritans. In answer to her amazement, Jesus replies to her in a way that catches her attention. He replies to her in a way that catches her attention. Jesus wants her to understand that it is he that is issuing an invitation, that he is the one making an offer. And the water that Jesus Christ is about to offer her, that same water that Isaiah mentions, invites us to come and drink, is the very same water that Jesus is about to issue an invitation to drink from to this Samaritan woman. Jesus wants her to understand it. The water that he is offering is not to quench her physical thirst, but it is to quench that thirst that all humanity has, that all humanity is born with. You see, that's what he wants her to understand. It isn't about drinking literal water from a literal well. It's about quenching that thirst that all humanity was born with, that need for a relationship with our God. That very thing that all humanity is trying to fulfill, and to quench that thirst through every and any other means. You see, that's the thirst that all humanity has, that Isaiah is extending that invitation to come and drink and to quench. At first, the woman is surprised that Jesus Christ engages her. In verse 10, Jesus answered her and said, "If you knew the gift of God, if you knew the gift of God, and who it is that said to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked of him, and he would have given you living water." He would have given you living water. At first, she can only interpret his conversation in a one-dimensional way. She can't see the depths at this point of Jesus' words, that there is more than she can immediately grasp. In verse 12, the woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, for the well is deep. From where then will you receive this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, which